My son and his wife said I don't deserve to be part of my husband's will. They said I was greedy. They were shocked when the will was read. Vancouver's rain has a way of making even glass and steel look soft, as if the sky were trying to hush the city with a damp hand. From the 32nd floor, the world was a watercolor: slick streets, blurred headlights, umbrellas blooming and folding like dark flowers. Inside the boardroom, though, everything was hard: angles and reflections and the sound of paper when it's handled by someone who knows what it can do. I sat at the far end of the long walnut table with my palms folded, thumbs barely touching, the way I used to hold my breath when Daniel was little and had a fever. The lawyer, Mr. Howard, had set a tidy stack of folders near his elbow, and a carafe of coffee steamed beside him, perfume for a room that otherwise smelled faintly of old leather and cold air. Across from me, my daughter-in-law watched everything with the alertness of a cat. Lena's hair was so sleek it threw light. She wore a white blazer and the kind of shoes you buy when you want people to hear you coming. For 7 years she has filled my son's life with plans and passwords, with calendars and guests. I'd tried to be kind to the version of her that smiled at me, and patient with the version that did not. We deserve that 20 million more than she ever will, she said now, the words precise, the tone practiced. She didn't look at me when she said it, she looked at the lawyer, as if my existence were a detail to be confirmed by a professional. Daniel's gaze flicked past my face and landed on the carafe, then the window, then the folders. My son used to have a way of listening that made you feel taller. Now he had a way of not listening that made the room feel smaller. Let's not pretend, he added, voice smooth, almost bored. We all know what my father wanted. Mom's been a burden long enough. It's time to do this properly. Mr. Howard cleared his throat but didn't respond. He was, in all things, tidy hair, tidy suit, a tidy, measured way of reading that made even cruel sentences sound polite. He slid a page from the top of the stack and began. As per the last will and testament of the late Mr. Miguel Alvarez, he said, the estate shall be divided as follows: 40% to Mr. Daniel Alvarez, 40% to Mrs. Helena Lena Alvarez, and 20% to Mrs. Isabella Alvarez. 20%. In another life, on another day, I might have felt stung. But the word passed through me like wind through a beaded curtain, each touch a small sound, nothing more. Lena's mouth tilted into satisfaction. Daniel's shoulders loosened. Silence gathered at the corners of the room. I let it. Silence, I had learned, is a magnificent listener. It hears things noise never will, the scratch of a pen as a cousin pretends to take notes, the too quick breath of a woman who's just realized she might lose a bet with herself, the faintest exhale from the lawyer when he's about to do something he would rather not. My fingers, still interlaced, were dry now. When Daniel spoke to me, "You should be grateful, Mom, gracious, even," I traced the edge of his voice and found, to my surprise, a tremor beneath the smoothness. Was it anticipation? Was it fear? Or was it simply the echo of my own pulse, steadying itself? I remembered nights so long they felt like weather, the midnight feedings and the second jobs, the careful folding of shirts at a kitchen table nicked by knives and homework, Miguel coming home with his jaw tight and his eyes soft, laying a single calloused hand on the back of my neck as if to say, we can do hard things without saying them aloud. I remembered the week we could not pay the gas bill and the way he lit a candle with a courtly flourish, as if to teach Daniel that light is light, no matter the source. And I remembered a Saturday afternoon 2 decades ago when Miguel spread maps across our bed. Not yet, he'd whispered, drawing circles around neighborhoods most people drove past without looking. But soon. Buy quiet. Build quietly. Keep it separate. Keep it safe. The boardroom clock clicked once, a tiny metronome. Mr. Howard adjusted his glasses. Something like a decision settled over his face. There is an additional matter, he said, and Lena's eyes sharpened. Daniel sat forward, palms flat on the table, which I interpreted as prayer or threat. It is a mother's curse to confuse the two. An additional matter? Lena repeated, sweet as citrus. And what matter would that be? Mr. Howard's gaze tiptoed to mine. We had rehearsed nothing, he and I, but grief trains you to recognize the choreography of revelations, the weight redistributing, the inhale you don't take, the way you can tell the rain has become a downpour without ever looking up. From beneath the table, he drew out a smaller envelope, the ivory thick as skin, the wax seal stamped with Miguel's initials in gold. For a moment, my husband was alive again in the room, his shoulders in that stamp, his carefulness, the way he enjoyed keeping one last trick for the end of a story. A cousin coughed. The rain pressed its palm harder against the window. This, Mr. Howard said, holding it up, is a supplementary document, to be opened at my discretion should certain behaviors present themselves. Lena's laugh was a little too loud. What behaviors? The behavior of stating the obvious? He didn't answer. He cracked the seal, and the sound, so small, was somehow the loudest thing in the room. He slid out a bundle of cream pages bound with a red ribbon and placed them, as if they were breakable, on the table. These are property deeds, banking records, and corporate filings for Alvarez Pacific Holdings Group, he said, and someone whispered "oh" before they could catch it. A private corporation wholly owned by Mrs. Isabella Alvarez. The company owns 9 boutique hotels across British Columbia and Washington state, in addition to commercial spaces in Vancouver, Victoria, and Seattle. The current valuation is a $50 million Canadian dollars. Even the rain seemed to pause. Lena's face, polished to a high shine a moment earlier, dulled. Daniel's eyes snapped to mine, searching for something, apology, permission, an explanation to climb into and live there until the storm passed. He found none. You hid this. It wasn't a question. It was the heavy fall of a conclusion. I protected this, I said, the words steady. Your father and I built it over years. We bought what no one else wanted and made it into what people would fight to visit. We kept it separate because love and money do not always share a roof peacefully. We kept it quiet because the loudest things in a family are not always the truest. How could you keep something like this from us? Lena's hand had become a fist around her pen. We are family. I kept it for family, I answered, and felt the truth of it steady my spine. For the day when the wrong mouths would say the wrong words. For the day when someone would look at me and see only a wall to be pushed through. Daniel flinched. A tiny movement, the way a boy recoils when a memory taps him on the shoulder. I thought of him at 6, falling off his bicycle, dirt on his cheeks and irritation in his eyes, the way he'd cried not from pain but from surprise that the earth would dare to be hard. Mr. Howard turned a page with a practiced flick. Mrs. Alvarez has managed these assets independently for many years. Revenues have been reinvested prudently, debt is low, the properties have appreciated significantly due to neighborhood revitalization and brand strength. Miguel and I had driven, back then, to small towns whose names tasted like cedar and salt. We'd met people who knew the month by the way the fog moved across a harbor. One lobby at a time, we replaced fraying carpet with slate and light. One payroll at a time, we learned the names of night managers' dogs, of the teenagers who worked the breakfast shift on weekends. In a ledger with marred leather and careful columns, I had written every expense with a mechanical pencil because I liked the idea that even a number would permit a revision if it made the world fairer. You bought hotels, Daniel said, incredulity reaching for contempt and failing to grasp it. You never said a word. Not every good thing announces itself, I said, and the sentence felt like the hinge on which my life had quietly turned. Power changes temperature when it moves in a room, you can feel it in your bones. The boardroom warmed by a degree. A cousin pushed back his chair and then pulled it forward again, as if he'd stood to say something and remembered, mid-rise, that his life would be easier if he didn't. There is a final clause, Mr. Howard said. He lifted a single sheet, pale and spare and heavy as a closing door. It concerns conduct. Lena rolled her eyes, an error, though she did not yet know it. Daniel set his jaw, the muscle in his cheek jumping like a moth. Any heir, Mr. Howard read, who, during the reading or settlement of this estate, engages in insulting, humiliating, or demeaning behavior toward Mrs. Isabella Alvarez shall forfeit their right to inherit any portion of the estate. Silence fell so complete we could hear the elevator cables hum 2 floors away. That's ridiculous, Lena said, the words snapping. You can't just. Mrs. Alvarez, Mr. Howard cut in gently, the clause is enforceable, and I will enforce it. Please take a moment before you continue. She did not take a moment. She took a breath, a long one, and chewed it like gristle. When she spoke again, her voice had softened around the edges, sugared to hide the pit. This is unexpected, she said. Surely, Daniel, we can. This is not about we anymore, Daniel said, and for the first time all afternoon he looked directly at me and didn't look away. What he saw, I do not know. A woman he loved and feared in equal measure, perhaps. Or the distance between the stories he'd been told about me and the woman sitting across from him now, less distance than he imagined, more than he wanted. Mom, he added, and the word sounded like itself again, what do you intend to do? I thought of all the questions he had asked as a boy and how most of them had been simple, which made them harder to answer. Can you drown in the rain? Do people who are mean know it, or is it like a shadow they can't see? I intend, I said, to be respected. And to respect myself. I turned toward Mr. Howard. Please record this in the minutes. I will set aside a significant portion of my privately held assets to establish the Alvarez Foundation, dedicated to supporting elderly women abandoned or neglected by their families. A further personal allocation is to be made to Ms. Rosa Delgado, who has stood by me for 20 years with loyalty and kindness. These allocations will not reduce the amounts assigned to others under the will. They will come from my separate holdings. Rosa, waiting out in the hallway with her knitting and her patients, had arrived at my house on a Tuesday in 2005 with a letter of recommendation and a quiet competence that did not need to be advertised. She cooked soup when grief hollowed me, ironed shirts as if crisp collars were prayers, and said, once, when I could not stop crying, love does not make you soft. It makes you durable. Across the table, Lena's expression rearranged itself into something I did not recognize, a face assembling and falling apart in the same instant. Daniel stared at his hands. His fingers, like his father's, were square at the ends, steady, useful. He had built things, once, with those hands, birdhouses and a lopsided bookshelf that I still keep in the guest room because I do not have the heart to part with the past when it offers me a place to rest. Let the allocations stand, he said finally. It cost him something to say it, and I was not ungrateful for the expense. Lena inhaled to object, but when she caught Mr. Howard's raised eyebrow, she exhaled it as silence. In that silence, a boundary drew itself cleanly around me. I stayed on my side of it. So did they. News in this city travels as if the rain were a courier, seeping beneath doors, sliding along banisters, arriving before you think to expect it. Within a week, the story had shrunk and swelled in the mouths of people who loved to tell it. There were versions where I was a mastermind and versions where I was a witch, versions where Daniel and Lena were villains and versions where they were merely young and hungry and unadvised. The truth, as usual, chose not to audition for any of the roles and simply went about its business of being itself. Invitations for my son went missing. Meetings were rescheduled indefinitely. A golf partner discovered suddenly that he preferred tennis and that his schedule, unfortunately, would not allow for either. Lena's face fell off the donor wall at a charity gala, quietly, bureaucratically, for reasons no one took the time to explain to her. On morning walks, neighbors weighed the merit of eye contact against the cost of complication and often decided, prudently, to examine their phones. I did not delight in their discomfort. That is a young person's luxury. What I felt was simpler, the ease of set-down weight. For years I had carried hurt and called it obligation. Now I laid it gently on a shelf and labeled it lesson. The Alvarez Foundation opened its first doors in Kitsilano in a building that used to be a hardware store. Sunlight fell through the front windows onto a long table where women folded flyers and told jokes and taught one another the recipes their hands remembered better than their mouths. We filled a pantry with staples, we fitted a small clinic with warming blankets and blood pressure cuffs, we started a reading hour where books selected their readers without regard to age. On Wednesday afternoons, Rosa ran a sewing circle that was both more and less about sewing than the name suggested. The first woman who came through our doors wore a coat that had lost its buttons. She had the look of someone who has learned to make herself less visible than the furniture. We gave her tea, then asked her name, then made space for the version of the story she could tell that day. When she left with a mended coat and an appointment card and, I hope, the knowledge that she had joined an inventory of people rather than problems. Your worth is not a rumor, I told a roomful of women one evening, the city throwing a pink light down over the rooftops outside. It is not negotiable. It is not subject to the votes of people who cannot see past their own hunger. At night, when the building emptied and the hum of the refrigerator became our only company, I stayed to fold blankets because the act soothed me, and because I prefer to touch the things I am responsible for. The lobby of the first hotel Miguel and I ever bought had a rug that shed. Every morning I had swept it and every evening it had somehow found a way to be what it was, imperfect and trying. I loved it for that, and I loved this work for the same reason. Daniel came by one Saturday in spring. He stood just inside the doorway, a man who did not know if he was welcome. I set down the box of donated sweaters I'd been sorting and waited. I heard you needed someone to look at the shelving in the storeroom, he said, eyes on the floorboards. They're bowing. They are, I answered. The weight of good intentions is heavier than most people think. A smile cut across his face before he could stop it. The first one that day, I suspect. He walked to the back, rolled up his sleeves, and set his hands to the work of correcting what had begun to lean. We did not speak of the will, of clauses, of the way a room can teach you who you are. We spoke of screws and supports and whether the donated paint in the closet would cover the scuffs if we gave the walls 2 coats. When he finished, he brushed his palms on his jeans and looked around the storeroom as if he were trying to memorize it. Mom, he said, and the word went to the place inside me where years are kept in neat stacks. I'm sorry. I know, I said, and I did. He nodded, once, and left the apology there, and I let it be enough for a morning when the light was good and the shelves were right and the world felt briefly manageable. Lena did not come. I do not need her to. Forgiveness is not a coupon I am obliged to honor in all seasons. I am not naive. The city will find new stories, the rain will find new windows to map with its patient fingers. Money will do what money always does, make people hopeful, greedy, generous, foolish, grateful, smug, and soft. But there is a small, local weather pattern I can control. In one building, on a street that smells like coffee and wet cedar, kindness is our climate, and we are stubborn about it. Sometimes, late, I unlock the office that holds the foundation's files and take out the ledger I kept all those years, the one with its marred leather, the one I wrote in with pencil so the future could be consulted for revisions. Between its pages, long before the first property deed and far before the first check that came without sorrow attached to it, Miguel wrote a single sentence in his tidy engineer's hand. Keep what matters safe until it is strong enough to keep us. I closed the ledger and put it back where it belongs. When the city sleeps, the building rests. The shelves hold. The buttons stay on. The women who have begun to believe themselves again dream in colors they thought they'd misplaced. And I go home under a sky that is learning, in its foggy way, how to be generous with stars. This, then, is the part no one could steal, not the 50 million, not the hotels, not even my name. It is the part with weight but no burden. The part that says to anyone who needs to hear it, quietly, stubbornly, like rain. You are not small. You are not alone. And you are not finished. Do well to like, share and subscribe. Thank you for watching.